What's up, guys? It's Apex here. Tonight we're going to talk about some advanced pressure washing techniques that I've picked up over the years, some of which have been taught, some of which I've figured out on my own. So let's get right into it. The first thing we're going to talk about is moving with the wand. As you can see here, I've got a well-used pressure wand that I have used for several years, as you can see by the impressively rusty part right there. Now, moving with the wand, okay, it's an easy thing to say, it's difficult to explain, but bear with me. Whenever you're on a job site and you're pressure washing something with, say, the tight fan, or, hold on, before we even start any of this, let's discuss the Jrod. So the Jrod. This Jrod that I use has 4 tips. They are the tight fan, the soft fan, the tight stream, and the soft stream. We call it the fat stream, fat fan, tight stream, okay? Hopefully YouTube's algorithm doesn't harm my channel for saying basic things like that. You can never know. Like, I don't know how that works, but I'm trying to adhere to their terms and conditions. But anyways, so the tight fan. We've got 4 tips for numerous different scenarios. The tight fan is most commonly used for trimming in. That's hitting areas with your wand that you can't reach with your surface cleaner. Primary use. We have the soft fan. Now the soft fan is good for a few things. I like to broadcast when I downstream using the soft fan tip whenever the mildew is light and it doesn't require as strong of a mixture, because the soft fan does cut down on the suction of a downstreamer a little bit. Now, the same thing with the fat stream or the big circle, whatever you want to call it. This is good for broadcasting chemical, and especially, I mean, you have to use it really on anything above, let's say, 1.5 stories. It's best to use this on 2-story stuff, and or you can use it on 1-story buildings, trailers, houses, stuff like that, as long as you stand back at a safe distance so you don't splatter into your own eyes or harm the customer's property in any way, which can include injecting water into loose outside structural members, okay, you don't want to blow water behind the siding or through the windows, case in point. But anyways, yeah, the fat stream, it's got its uses. And lastly, the tight stream. This one is the most niche out of all 4 of these. This tight stream tip can come in handy whenever, let's say, you have a really stubborn piece of gum on some concrete that you're trying to get rid of, and you don't have a pressure tip in your jacket pocket. Rather than taking a trip back to the truck and trailer, you can just pop on this tight stream and probably get it off, whereas if it's so tough that the tight fan does not get it off, this one might. It could save you some time. Now, another function of these tips in conjunction with this wand is whenever you put a higher flow through them. So typically, I like to use the DN10 ball valve, and that thing is great. I can talk about that thing for 30 minutes, but I'll keep it brief. These tips, when used in conjunction with a higher flow, typically from 2 machines working together through 1 hose, or as commonly referred to as a Siamese kit, these 2 tips work really good. I like using the fat fan tip to rinse with this gun using approximately 12 gallons per minute at the wand, because you're starting with 2 8-gallon-per-minute machines in my example, and by the time you get through the hose, through the gun, the friction losses, all of that stuff, you're left with less flow than 16 gallons a minute. That would be in a perfect world where you're just filling up a bucket with no resistance, when your machines would make absolute output. But to my point, whenever you have this fat fan tip on, you can use some pretty advanced techniques. Now, another thing, real quick, when putting on the Jrod, what I like to do, I select my tip, put it into there, and then I can slide the collar back with my fingers and it just falls in, just one hand. You can put on a Jrod and take it off with one hand. There's no reason you should have to do this with 2 hands if you're an experienced pressure washer. Now, with this gun and this fat fan tip, or soft fan tip rather, you can, there's so many different ways to rinse. I started out rinsing just side to side with the spray pattern vertical. That's how most people would logically rinse, but it's not the most efficient way. The most efficient way I've found is it's a toss-up. I mean, you can use the ball valve. It's pretty good. We'll get into that later, but one way, if you don't have a ball valve, you can use an open hose, but it's really forceful and it's like a laser beam when you need a snow shovel type of thing there. And it's hard to control. If you have just an open hose, it's going to shoot that water out so straight and fast, you're not going to be able to move much unless you kind of put your finger over it a little bit, but that's just dangerous. If that thing starts whipping around, it can seriously hurt you. But if you have the soft fan, you can take and you can move it kind of like this in such a way, like making kind of like a soft U shape back and forth with the fan pattern. And what that does is, let me grab a prop real quick. Let's pretend that this stick is our blade of water coming out of the soft fan. Now, in real life, when it hits the concrete, it's going to be about 3 feet wide, but bear with me. So, this is how it's usually hitting the concrete. If you're moving like this, like normal. However, if you turn your gun or your Jrod, depending on what you're doing, sometimes I'll turn the gun. Sometimes I'll go so far as to turn my gun upside down, just depending on what I'm doing. But whenever you have the soft fan flat and you're moving it back and forth, it acts as a better shovel to where the force of the water is concentrated and it's going to move all of the silt and heavy stuff further. Now, let's talk about what happens whenever you're rinsing a large parking lot and the sand and silt, it starts to get thick on you. Credit to my mentor, that's the way he says it. He says it's getting thick on you, and this is what you do. So it's all dependent on your water, okay? If, let's say, you're hooked up to a fire hydrant, or you have a good dual feed going where you're feeding your buffer tank with not 1 but 2 water hoses, and they've got good flow. You'll say you got all the water you could ever need, tank's overflowing, okay? In that situation, I would love and dream of having a 1/2-inch pressure hose, because you can lay down the freaking law with a 1/2-inch pressure hose. That thing will flow water like nothing you've ever seen. Look at me sounding like a certain person that I support. But anyways, yeah, if you have a 1/2-inch hose, you can use that. It's wonderful, but most people commonly are going to use a 3/8 pressure hose. So let's pretend you have all the water and you're rinsing a parking lot and it starts to get thick on you, as it inevitably does, because when you surface clean a concrete parking lot, It's gonna dislodge some sand, dirt, rock. So as I was saying, if you're washing a parking lot and the sand starts to build up to where you can't just simply rinse it, it doesn't go anywhere, here's what you need to do. You use as much water as you can at your disposal. If you have unlimited water, that's great. What you would do, what I would do really, is maximize the flow. The flow, as I've been taught, is what moves all of that heavy stuff. You'll move more with flow than you will with pressure. Flow is like a tsunami. It's going to take everything with it, whereas pressure is like a hurricane or a tornado. It's okay. Pressure has its uses, so does flow. But anyways, in order to use the most flow, what's going to flow the most, you might ask? Well, a ball valve and two machines running at the same time. And if you have enough flow, that open ball valve is going to be your best friend. And whenever you hit the aggregate with that and it's moving it along, it can work pretty good. I've noticed that if you can hold just the tip of your finger, just the very tip of it, over the water coming out of the end of the ball valve, it spreads it out just enough for it to softly contact the sand and keep it moving instead of creating splatter. See, splatter is our enemy when we're rinsing. Splatter will slow you down. It will make your night take forever. You don't want splatter when you're rinsing. You just want the water to move the stuff. You want it to take its momentum and transfer it into whatever you're moving. So the best way is just hold the tip of your finger down over the end of that ball valve. Or another way you could do it is you get a little fitting and a female quick connect, and you put those things together, and you can put that over the end of your ball valve, and it will naturally choke down that water some to where it's coming out at a higher velocity, but it's still keeping the same flow or almost as much flow. But crucially, it's at the end of a ball valve, so it's a lot easier to control than a full-on gun, which the gun also chokes down the flow significantly. With this, in order to not splatter, you can do the same exact thing. You can put the tip of your finger over it if you're really close, or if you're further away, you can just hold it out level, or nearly level, and spray, and the water will have enough time between leaving that tip and contacting the surface that it will naturally spread out, and it will carry more of its momentum into the aggregate instead of just splattering. The further away you are, the better angle you're going to get to. A big thing about the angle of the water is the flatter that angle is, the more acute that angle is coming down, rather than, okay, so here, let's say this is your angle of water, okay? The more acute that angle, well no, the more closer to 90 that angle is, the better, okay? So how can we get that? Well, we can go lower or we can get further back, because that water is going to drop down as it heads out. So in the most extreme cases, what you've seen me do in the few videos is you can take the ball valve and put it on the ground basically and let it flow straight through the thickest part, and you slowly scoot it over so it catches all of that sand and pebbles and rocks, and it flings them 20 or 30 feet down the line. It just moves massive amounts of material. That's good, but you don't want to be doing that all night. You only want to do that when you absolutely have to, when you're like in the middle of a valley of concrete, it'll get that stuff moving super quick. Now, let's say you don't have a lot of water and you are on a job cleaning a lot of concrete. Well, what you can do then is you have a few options depending on your scenario, where you're at, the type of area you're working in, the security. If you have the opportunity with like a closed facility or somewhere that is not active, one thing you can do if you know the speed of the faucets is to leave your tank filling and go grab a bite to eat. I would only do this if you can have your trailer locked to your truck, so depending on the area, you don't end up getting stolen from. Nobody wants that. And when you come back, you'll have plenty of water. Now, let's say you have water problems. One thing you can do if you have a setup similar to mine, which is most people doing commercial pressure washing probably have a similar setup. What you can do is you can start to use pressure instead of flow whenever water is scarce. This involves using the tight fan tip. It's going to be way more efficient than just blowing through all of your water super quick. You'll actually finish the night faster by using more pressure and less flow when you're scarce on water than using all of your water that you have and then having to wait on it to refill. It's all about how hard you're making that machine work. That machine's gonna work harder. It's gonna make the water go further. It's gonna make the water count for more if it's spread out using pressure rather than low pressure and high flow when you don't have that much water. Now, we like to gauge our machine's power in percentage. So we're talking about a Honda GX690 with an 8 gallon per minute general pump that produces 3,500 PSI. It's a pretty common setup. Nowadays, they're moving towards EFI and IGX 800s with 10 gallon to 12 gallon per minute pumps. It may vary, but when you're dealing with these Hondas, this is the way I like to deal with them. You have different settings on your throttle, and we like to do it by percentages. So whenever you have low water, I typically like to run at about a 20 to 30% power. Now, for me personally, 30% power is when the throttle adjustment is right in line with the RPM letters on the side of the throttle. You have 0% up to 30% at the RPMs. Then you have about 60-70% where it says max. And then above that, you have 100%, which you rarely use. You don't have to use 100%. You're just putting unnecessary wear on your machine. I mean, you can, it's kind of like your truck, you don't go full throttle all the way to work. It's, these machines are governed down. They're doing lower RPMs than they can do because of the pump, but I digress. The main thing is you want to maintain about 30% power. If your water gets very low, you can do 20% power, but if you're having that big of water problems that you have to go below that, I wouldn't even bother. I would just wait on the water, reassess the situation. There's probably a better option for you. Now, we can talk about many different things. The main thing I wanted to talk about tonight is the way you hold your wand. Now, there's a few ways that I've learned in muscle memory and stuff to hold this wand in an effective manner. And it's kind of hard to show you guys indoors, but you don't have to grip this trigger with your whole hand. You can just grip it with 2 fingers if you have a hose hanging out the bottom of it, and it better balances the wand. It lets you elevate it up really high to point it and get different angles and everything. A big thing with mastery and pressure washing is your angles. Your angles matter so much in so many different facets. Let's say, for instance, you're washing a residential house and you are using your fat stream or soft fan to power rinse the house down after you've downstreamed it. So let's pretend that, one second, let me grab a prop. Okay, let's pretend that the whiteboard is the window, or a window ledge, or window, whatever. This piece of wood is your water stream coming at it. You're going to want the water to come from the side of the window, especially near the bottom where it sits, where the window sits onto the ledge and the seal. You want the water to come in at an angle instead of straight on at the window, because it's going to make less pressure and it's going to have less of an opportunity for that water to penetrate through that bottom seal and into the customer's home. Now, if water gets into the customer's home, first of all, you're doing something wrong, but if you have to deal with it, stop what you're doing immediately, turn your machine off, assess the damage if there's any damage, and grab a towel or something. Just deal with it. Now, if you're doing it right, you're not getting water in that customer's house. The only situation where you're going to commonly get water in, it depends on the structure, it depends on the weather seals of the doors and everything, but is doors. Double doors, single doors. Doors are naturally a harder part of the home to insulate from the elements, and pressure washing, like a hard rainstorm, is some of the toughest elements your home is going to face. So just be careful around doors, and especially wooden doors, stained doors. All of these things are very susceptible to SH and water, especially clear coat on wooden doors. They will lighten up. They will look ugly if you hit them with SH. And Sherwin-Williams had a run of organic paint that would experience streaks whenever people would downstream it. So you really want to look out for stuff like that. I've heard horror stories of having to repaint an entire house. You don't want to be that guy. That's a bad thing. And, you know, we can talk about some different pitfalls and things that I've experienced in my pressure washing journey. I've had some big wins. I've had some big losses. You know, it happens to everybody. You got trial and error. Nobody's completely perfect. Even the ones that think they are. You're not perfect. Now, one of the biggest things I messed up in pressure washing is I had a customer whose gutter fascias had a failing paint. It was extremely oxidized. It was already coming off. My inexperience with that led me to wash the roof, soft wash the roof, and I took precautions. We used water. We rinsed extensively to intercept any SH that could possibly be getting onto the gutters. However, SH has a way of mixing with the water even when you're rinsing, and it melted some paint off of the face of the gutters, and it caused some light streaks to appear. Now, I compensated my customer and corrected my damage. The customer was, you know, as happy as he could be. I wasn't happy, but I got it done. You know, I didn't take too much of a loss on that. It happens, okay? You have to be prepared for these types of scenarios. especially if you're roof washing. Roof soft washing is one of the most risky things that you do in pressure washing, because that chemical does not care. That chemical will ruin a customer's landscaping. It will splotch a wooden fence with white splotches in a heartbeat. It will etch windows if left out in the sun. It will kill pets if left in their water bowls. It could even blind you or your customer if a strong enough SH gets into your eyes and you don't rinse it out. It's going to melt your corneas. It will make you blind. You have to watch out for that. Take extreme caution when you're handling sodium hypochlorite, as it doesn't care about you and it would love to ruin your day. And you really want to be clean when you handle the stuff. You don't want it getting all over you, getting all over your skin, because we all know what bleach does. We all know what SH does to things. So be careful, don't let it get on your skin. Ironically enough, I've had a single drop of SH splatter into one of my eyes before, and I immediately rinsed it out because it started burning like you wouldn't believe. Your eyes instantly tear up, you're gushing tears instantly. You just water. You always want to have access to flowing water whenever you're around sodium hypochlorite, so you can rinse out your eyes should the worst happen and you get bleach in your eyes. You want to have something to rinse it out. Now, there's whole courses and educational items on how to do all of this stuff, but I'm just giving my own personal input as to what I've learned over the years, a few key points and takeaways, so that even, whatever you do, the biggest thing in this is safety, okay? I don't know, all these things in the industry, all these videos, a lot of people need to talk about safety. Now, I'll give you one example. I almost got fried. Somebody actually, Mr. Billy Davison saved my life. He saved it. I was walking with a aluminum ladder, the folding ladders that we have, and I was carrying it extended for some reason. I was moving it around, and he said, whoa, stop. And I stopped dead in my tracks, and he kind of pointed up. I looked up, and there's power lines above my head, and I don't want to roll those dice. I don't want to know what would have happened if that ladder would have contacted those power lines. I wouldn't be sitting here today talking to you guys. I would be fried chicken on the he was a good guy. Yeah, that dude Apex, he was a cool dude. So anyways, you gotta be so careful. And anyways, let's get back on to topic. So safety, another thing you want to do is, before you even leave your driveway or your storage unit or whatever, you want to make sure your vehicle is in proper working order. That's pretty self-explanatory. I don't have to talk about that for 15 minutes. Most people know how to keep their truck up, but you want to check the obvious stuff. Your tire pressure, let it warm up so you're not putting wear on your engine. Make sure your towing package and your hitch is properly secured. Whenever you connect your trailer or whatever you're doing, just make sure it's secured before you leave the driveway or the shop or the job site. You always want to check your hitch connection and your safety chains, your wiring connection. Make sure nothing's under your trailer or sitting on the fender or left in front of your truck or trailer. people run over tools, and unfortunately sometimes people run over each other. I've been lucky enough not to have that happen, but I can't speak for everyone. I've never seen it happen, but just always be cognitive of your surroundings. A lot of these newer vehicles have cameras, but I work with Mr. Billy Davison, and we have a rule where you do a walk around, you check your hitch before you leave, you make sure everything is put away, everything's in its right spot, and you have all your equipment, everything before you leave or move on to the next job. It's vital that you keep possession of all your equipment and know that everybody's in the truck before you start moving with it, unless you can see them outside. Again, I've never had an issue with this, but I can't speak for everyone. Now, another thing that you're probably going to run into at some point in your pressure washing career is dealing with quick connects. I have a whole video on quick connects, but to make it short, they are what I view as a consumable item, such as Teflon or O-rings, gasoline, True Blue. There's a lot of consumables that you don't need to worry about replacing. You need to actively and want to replace these things because they cost you time and effort. I happen to have a female quick connect on the end of this gun that has patina on it because it's been on there for so long. It's typically the male quick connect ends that wear out constantly because of the pressure, and there's about 6 ball bearings inside of a female quick connect. You can't really see it from here because of my front facing camera, but yeah, they're in there. And what they do is they press on that collar of the male end of the quick connect that goes inside of them. They press on that collar part, and what that does is it flares out the metal to a larger diameter than what's inside of the female quick connect, and it makes it really hard to pull out and push in because it's scratching and digging into the sides of the female quick connect wall. And you don't want that. That's just going to tear up your quick connects. It's going to be a hassle. So in short, what you can do is you can scrape off that ridge that builds up on the part that's about a 1/4 inch from the tip of the male quick connect fitting. It's like a 1/4 inch back. It's a little ridge. You'll see it where those ball bearings have dug into that metal and pressed it, peened it out. There's going to be a little ridge that's sticking up past the outer diameter of that male quick connect. You want to scrape that down with some pliers. Some channel locks with teeth on them work really good. Just give it a few twists in that. It'll be gone. Don't try to rub it on the concrete unless you don't have tools on you. Maybe you can get that to work if you find a curb, but it will not work on flat concrete. No way, no how. So, yeah, quick connects. Now, let's talk about when okay, so you got everything in order, you're leaving the house, you've got your truck and trailer, leaving the shop, whatever. What I like to do is I like to look at the route ahead of me to know what's going on. I'll typically street view the house if I haven't already looked at it in person, because you never go in without knowing. So let's say you're getting close to the neighborhood. What you want to do is, no matter, we're talking about residential house washing here. What you want to do is, if it's a house that's like a regular little house in one of those neighborhoods where everybody's house looks the same, where your neighbors are very close to you, that's a lot of you guys are going to be washing those very typical houses, such as depending on the builder in your area, like DSLD or DR Horton, these type of big name brand houses that are pretty standard across the United States. So what you're going to want to do is pull up with your hose reel facing the property. Your hose reel is typically on the driver's side of the trailer. Some people put them on the back. Some people put them wherever. But wherever your hose reel is, have it facing the property. Unless it's on the back of the trailer, then, you know, if you've got some free guides, that's fine too. And your first move is going to be to get water flowing. The customer expects you already. You don't even have to talk to the customer really unless they're there, and you know, you can make brief contact, build some positive rapport with them. You know, just be a person. Just talk to them like a normal person. That way they know that their home is in good hands, that you are of sound mind. You know, you talk to people like you seem like you have your stuff together. They're gonna be cool with it. So you pull up. First thing I'm doing is I'm setting a cone out at the front and the back. One in front of my truck bumper, one behind my trailer tailgate. That way, if some jackrabbit's driving really fast down the street and he hits something, I'm not liable because I have a cone out. It's clearly marked. You know, I don't actually know the official laws on that, so you know, it might vary in what area you're in, but typically it's just put your cones out. Have a couple of traffic cones on the truck and trailer. It's a great idea. It's required. So pull up, drop the cones out. The first thing you're going to want to do is get water going, because as long as water is filling that buffer tank, you can be doing anything else and you're not wasting time, because you're going to have to wait on that water to start flowing before you can really do anything. So what I like to do, and what Mr. Billy Davidson taught me to do, is you wash the house in a clockwise motion. What I personally like to do is I'll get the water going, I'll get all that set up, like take the water hose, clean capture, like let the water flow out the end of the hose for, you know, just give it long enough to where you know it doesn't have any grains of sand or anything in it. It's clean water. You want clean water. Hook that up to your buffer tank. Let your buffer tank drain some water out so it flushes out any bugs or anything that might have gotten in there, road dust, whatever. Let it flush out of your dump valve for a little while, and then close your dump valve. That water is going to take a minute to build up. So what you can do in the meantime is you can start to pull your pressure hose. Let's say if you're just washing a house that has some light mildew on it, you can start pulling your pressure hose, pull it around the right side of the house, take it kind of wide. That way when you round the first corner, if you're working alone, that pressure hose can rub on the corner of a foundation and it's not going to hurt it. Especially, you know, if you have a non-marking hose, it's really not going to hurt anything. People do it all the time, okay? Preferably, you don't want the hose to rub on anything, but it's rarely a perfect world. Wherever I can get away with my hose rubbing on something that's not going to hurt it, it speeds me up by twofold. Now, once you get your hose stretched out around the back, I like to go to the second corner. I like to get to the back of the house all the way to the far side, as far as I need to reach. You always go to the furthest point first with your pressure hose. That way you don't have to double back. Now, you stretched out your hose. While you're walking back, doing all of that, water has been filling. By this point, it's probably 3 or 4, maybe 5 inches, which is a couple of inches above the output of the IBC tote that you're using to carry water on your trailer. At this point, you're going to warm your machines up. Everybody should know how to do that. You pull the choke out, start the machine. As Billy Davidson says, let it cough up that phlegm, and then once it's done coughing up that phlegm, put that choke back in and it's going to run strong. You let the machines warm up, he said, until the muffler is too hot to touch. That's a pretty good rule of thumb. You just let that oil get up to temperature. That way you're not stressing your engine out as much. And the belts too. So we use belt drive machines. You want to make sure that belt like you can't really gauge its temperature because it's inside of a shroud, but it tends to warm up with the machine. If you were to just be a jackass and start your machine up on full throttle and then like close your ball valve or let off your trigger, that belt would start squealing, and then it would go into bypass. Or if you tried to use a pressure tip like that, like you don't want your belt to squeal, because those belts are not cheap. They're a hassle to deal with. You pretty much, you can fix them yourself. It's really hard. I've seen it done, but there's a certain sequence and way you have to do it, because most of these pressure washing skids are not built to where the pump is on rails and it can only move in one axis. Most of them can move in several axes and not be in square. So you don't want to have to, I mean, you can change a belt in a pinch, but if it's not perfectly aligned, straight, and true, your machine will chew up that belt. So always warm your machines up. That's going to prolong the life of them. You want to get as much life out of these commercial pressure washing units as possible, so you can keep your bottom line looking good. And so anyways, we're back to our residential house wash. You let your machines warm up. You might be getting a few other things ready. You're pulling out all your hose. You could actually pull hose while the machines are warming up, but I always like to know what my machines are doing. Like, I can see water coming out. You don't want to ever dry fire your pressure washing machines for more than like a few seconds if you absolutely must, because friction and heat is the enemy of a pressure washing pump, and they will burn up. You will mess up those seals. The water is what cools those pumps down. That's actually another function of the buffer tank, Mr. Davidson taught me, is that it recycles, it recirculates the water, and it cools that pump down. So you let your machines warm up. You're done letting your machines warm up, you kill the machines. Make sure all your hoses are routed correctly. Get your downstreamer out of the bucket of water you keep it in so it doesn't go bad. And you hook up the downstreamer to the pressure hose first, and then the whip line or the machine that you're using. You never, ever want to hook up a downstreamer to your Siamese kit whip line or the output on the machine and not have a pressure hose on the end of that downstreamer, because that downstreamer has a very small orifice inside of it, and it will shoot water out like a red tip, like a laser beam, and it will cut through things. It's very dangerous. Don't do it. Always hook it up to your pressure hose first. That way, if like something happens or whatever and you drop it, you have to handle something, it's already hooked up to the pressure hose, it's not hooked up to the machine. So you hook up your downstreamer, and you're going to start your machine on an idle, and you're going to take the end of that downstream line and you're going to check it for suction. That thing should be able to suck hard enough to where it'll stick to your finger if you pick it up. Now, with that downstreamer, once you've verified the suction, what you can do, okay, again, it depends. So, some people, it really depends. Some people go as far as to pre-wet everything and cool down windows with regular fresh water on a really hot day. If you need to do that, do it. It's going to help. It's actually required on a hot enough day so that your SH doesn't flash evaporate and end up etching windows. So once you have your downstreamer functioning properly, you set your power to whatever you want it to be for what you're doing. I typically run my downstreaming power at about 30% to 40%. You can do 60%, 70%. The higher your throttle is, the less potent of an SH is going to come out the end of that ball valve or wand whenever you're downstreaming, because the more water, you're going to be moving more water through that downstreamer, and the Venturi effect of sucking the chemical in is not going to be able to keep up. Now it will actually suck more on a higher throttle, but it's going to have way more water moving through it, so you're really going to end up with a colder mix, a less potent mix. Another thing that's going to affect this is back pressure. The more hoses you have on, the less potent of a SH mix you're going to have at that ball valve. The most potent you're going to have is a short hose with an open ball valve, or an open hose, whatever, preferably a ball valve. You never really want to do chemical with an open hose. That's just, you have no control over it unless you can give somebody a signal to kill the machine or take you out of the chemical. But so a potent downstream is going to be a 100-foot hose on an open ball valve. That's for like some nasty mildew that you don't necessarily want to break out the X-Jet or the 12 volt or the pump up sprayer, what have you. You know, gas roof pump, super pump, electric pump, whatever you got. Sometimes all it takes is a 100-foot hose or 200-foot hose with an open ball valve. Now, the majority of light mildew on the majority of houses that you're going to be washing, you can just use 200 to 300 feet of hose and an open ball valve. And when you're broadcasting this stuff, you want it to spread out. Again, you don't want splatters. We don't like splattering as pressure washing people. It's our enemy. We try to fight it as much as we can. It's going to slow you down. It's going to waste chemical. You don't want splatter. So you want that chemical to fall onto that, just apply to that surface. Like, let's pretend this is vinyl siding. If you're splattering, it's just going straight at it, just boom, splattering off, going everywhere, getting all over everything. Whenever I have an open ball valve, I like to put my finger over it sometimes to kind of fan that pattern out, make it a softer application of the chemical onto the surfaces. Another advanced technique is you want to apply your chemical from low to high. That way it doesn't just run down as much, like you get less waste like that. At least for soft washing a roof, that's what really helps it. Now, when you're just putting chemical on vinyl, you can kind of be generous with it. I mean, you're not using that much chemical. It's not like roof soft washing. That downstreaming makes SH go a very long way. So you do have some room for error when you're applying with downstreaming. So you're at that second corner of the house after, okay, so let's back up a bit. Okay, so you got your downstreamer, it's working correctly. Put that thing in the chemical and then make haste and get over to the end of that ball valve, because that chemical is coming through that hose about as fast as your light jog is. And once you get to it, you can listen to it. You can listen to it. You can actually hear the difference that air and water coming out of the downstreamer versus chemical and water. It's going to have two very distinct sounds. You pick that up with experience. Another way is to just touch your fingers on it and kind of sniff them to see if it smells like SH. Now, over the years, you may go nose blind to SH and not be able to hear it. I'm not be able to smell it, and you won't. You can kind of tell, but a good way is you can, or another way to know is like that chemical is only going to take a certain number of seconds to start feeding out the end of your line. And if you don't see suds or some telltale sign, then that means you're not drawing chemical, something is wrong. You're probably dealing with a downstream injector that has a stuck check valve or something, but since you already verified your downstreamer is sucking, you're not dealing with this. Unless you're using way too long of a hose, in which case, yeah, that back pressure will make it to where that downstreamer does not pull chemical. So you got everything figured out. You're at the second corner of that house. You can start getting everything, broadcasting your downstream chemical onto the fascia, the soffit, the vinyl. You want to do it at such an angle to where you're not injecting water up and into the soffit and vinyl and cracks and creases and vent holes and stuff. You want to put it on, make sure you hit it from windows from both directions, because if they're inset and you go by them one way, you're not going to get that other side. Just get an even, generous application of the chemical as you're moving along. You know, you're packing your hose in your left hand and using your ball valve in your right hand if you're right-handed. You're moving along. You want to keep the wind to your back. You don't want to be pissing in the wind, so to speak. You want to make that wind work for you, not against you, so you don't get a face full of bleach mist. Because downstreaming, it's not that harmful, but, you know, be clean with what you do. So you're broadcasting that chemical, moving along. Now what we're doing is we're taking mental notes. You got timers in your head. You're taking mental note, especially if it's a sunny, hot day, of how long that chemical has been sitting on that window. When you cooled it off, how hot is it? You can touch the windows, feel the windows, make sure they're cooled off before you apply chemical. Now, you've got timers in your head running for how long it's been on the windows. You run it, you're getting it. Let's say if it's a really extremely hot day, you can just do the back side, just one side at a time. Okay. If it's really that serious, you can do one side at a time. I like doing two sides at a time. Some people do the whole house at a time. It depends on the day. It depends on what you got going on, how many people you have helping you. This is for a solo scenario. This is the way that I've done it and find it to be most efficient. So I'm going to downstream two sides of the house, the back side and the north side typically, because it's the worst. Depending on the house, what orientation it is. And I should have a glass of water here. I'll have that next time I record. But you do two sides of the house, get them downstreamed. And once you're done, you can turn your ball valve off, go back over to the trailer, take the SH out of whatever container, take the downstream whip line out of whatever container you have it sucking the chemical out of, but don't set it on the ground. Don't let it suck up sand, obviously dirt, other things. It will foul out, like it will clog that downstream mechanism, and it will make it difficult to use. You'll maybe have to blow it out or take it apart to dislodge whatever debris is getting into it. So yeah, don't let the whip line suck up sand or hit the ground. Just put it somewhere safe. Whenever you have a partner or a remote downstream system or whatever you have besides being alone, you can tell your partner, all right, go take me out of the chemical, and they'll take you out of the chemical, and you can actually pull the trigger or open the ball valve, and you're going to have, let's say on 200 feet of hose, you might have like 20 or 30 seconds of chemical in that line. It depends. Again, everything, it always depends, but you're going to have chemical in the line. So what that's going to do is it's going to suck the rest of the chemical that's in that downstreaming whip line out of it, so it doesn't just sit there and drip onto your trailer deck, your axles, whatever's below it, your wiring, your equipment. It's cleaner just to have a bucket of water that thing can suck out of. Hell, it could suck out of your buffer tank. Just put it somewhere where it's not going to just leak trace amounts of chemical onto your setup, because that hurts the longevity of it. So now we're going to potentially we can just kill the machine and let this stuff dwell on the home. You want to let the SH dwell on the vinyl for approximately 15 to 20 minutes per coat. Typically you need 1, maybe 2 coats before you see activation or the green going away, so to speak. It'll activate that mildew away, and it'll be nice, pretty, bright vinyl on the side of the house. And so, like, let's say you're letting it dwell, you got some dwell time going on. If they have a back patio, now's the time where you bring the surface cleaner around while you're waiting on stuff to dwell. Waiting on stuff to dwell gives you a good opportunity to get other things moving along, moving hoses, moving your surface cleaner. You know, just you want to be stacking your tasks in such a manner that you're getting one thing done while you couldn't get another thing done. So let's go ahead and start rinsing. I like to rinse with the soft stream, the fast stream tip from a distance. Some people like to rinse with an open ball valve. It's really at your discretion. I like rinsing with this fast stream because it's less walking I have to do. I can reach the whole side I can reach like 30, 40 feet wide just from where I'm standing typically with that fast stream tip. So, you know, one of the biggest things my mentor taught me is high to low. You want to rinse high to low. That way you don't have to re-rinse stuff if it rinses down from high to low on what you've already rinsed. High to low. You rinse down from your fascia, your soffit, down the vinyl. You want to be careful around those windows and outlets. Boy, oh boy, you want to watch those outlets. Preferably you have them already taped with like a rubber glove or something to protect those outlets. Because on some older homes, they may not even be GFI outlets. Now, I'm no outlet expert, but a ground fault indicator outlet will typically not fry. Okay, I've never really. I remember maybe one instance in my 7 years of pressure washing where they had a strip outlet sitting under a porch swing, and some water got onto it, and it started like just buzzing, electrical fire, lightning, kind of just bzzz, like coming out of the strip outlet. That's the one and only time I've ever seen the infamous blue smoke. And yeah, you just be careful around outlets and windows. And so you're rinsing everything down. You're going to see a little bit of debris come out of the vinyl, like little black bug dots, and sometimes you're going to have to hit with a little bit harder. So like, let's say you have some cocoons or those little hanging things that get up in the soffit and fascia a lot of the time. You can hit those with the fast stream. It's going to take them down. Another thing for efficiency with using your flow is you can take that downstreamer off. It's going to increase the inner diameter of your hose effectively because you're taking out a choke point. So that'll give you a little bit more powerful of a flow. If you're still, you're trying to save time or whatever, you can use the tight fan very carefully, okay? You just want to be very careful with that tight fan whenever vinyl is involved, because if you hit it too hard, you can zor it up or stripe it up, depending on how you want to say that, the oxidation that's on the side of the vinyl. You can do that. Now, it's easier to do that with a pressure tip, but if you're using a pressure tip on vinyl, something has gone terribly wrong. You might want to just stop and rethink your life choices. But, maybe call somebody before you go any further. But anyways, you rinse the house down in a safe manner, effectively. And, there's different variables and scenarios to this. Like if there's a patio involved and the patio's already been pre-treated, well, In that case, what I would do if I were you, while the chemical on the vinyl is dwelling still, what you can do is you can go ahead and rinse those windows off. If it's a really hot day, you want to do that anyway. You don't want to let that chemical sit on those windows. It'll flash evaporate. Just go ahead and rinse that off. Get those windows off your mind for a minute. Then you can surface clean the patio and trim it out. It doesn't matter the order that you trim and surface clean in. It's really personal preference because it's the same amount of time that you're going to be putting pressure on that concrete. So what I typically do, I'll go ahead and surface clean first. That way I know exactly what I need to trim and I don't over trim. You can trim too much not knowing how far that surface cleaner can get in some spots, some tight spots like corners and along edges. So, you want to get all your surface clean in and trimming done before you rinse. Now, what I like to do, I like to rinse the patio off and then rinse the walls off, because what comes off of those walls is going to be negligible to insignificant to nothing. Whereas if you rinse the walls first, then you rinse the patio, you're going to probably splatter stuff from the patio up onto the walls and have to re-rinse the walls. And in some, it's a good practice to do a final rinse whenever you're leaving an area. You just final rinse your vertical surfaces and your flat surfaces with chairs and tables, glass tables, whatever, what have you. And you don't really know it's clean until you reach out and touch it. You want to feel like the lower part of a door or a window. You want to make sure you don't feel any grit on that, because that's just sloppy. You don't want to be sloppy. You want to make sure things are smooth, well rinsed. Rinsing is one of the hardest things to truly master in pressure washing, because there's a lot that goes into it, a lot of different scenarios. So let's say we've got, another thing you're going to run into. So you're probably going to run into the HVAC unit at this point, and you want to keep that thing rinsed. You don't want to let chemicals sit on it, and you want to really be careful whenever you're trimming and doing the concrete base that it's sitting on. Typically they sit on a concrete base pad. If it's a normal run-of-the-mill house, you can trim that. Just don't hit the coils, like the little fins, the little metal fins that help radiate the heat. They're typically in a casing. Just be careful. Again, angles. What I like to do first is hit the risers of the pad, and I hit them at an angle with the wand really far away from my body. I'm hitting them at an angle, kind of backing up. That way, the splatter coming off of that tight fan is rebounding in a direction that is not me or my clothes that have to get back into my truck. So do the risers first. Now the riser, let's say this is your AC pad, this is the top part. The riser is right here. It's this part that's vertical, the vertical part of the concrete. I like to do that first and then do the top, and then you rinse off the unit of any splatter, you rinse off the pad, and move on with your day. So another big thing is weatherheads. You want to watch that, bro. You want to keep your water away from that damn weatherhead, because that's where the big boy electricity is going into the house. And, that's a big safety thing, is watch out for weatherheads. You can carefully wash, like there's such a danger that, I'm no expert on weatherheads. YouTube, don't try this at home, all that kind of stuff, guys. This is my disclaimer. I'm not an expert on weatherheads. What I typically do is I wash around them. I don't contact them with my water, because I don't know enough about electricity to know that it could go through the water stream, back up through the gun into my hand, You want to really watch. Water and electricity are not friends, obviously. Okay, moving on. So you got the back side done. You don't have to worry about it. You got one of the sides done. You don't have to worry about it. That's great. That's awesome. What you then do is you just do the other two sides of the house like you just did those first two, except now you have to watch out for the front door and doorbells. A lot of people have doorbell cameras now. What I like to do is I like to stretch a glove over them, maybe, use some tape, whatever. Make it safe. If you have to, do a couple of test spots on some different surfaces to make sure that your downstream mix is not going to splotch, fade, degrade the surfaces of the home in any way. Once you know it's safe, you can then move on and do it. Another thing is copper awnings. You gotta really watch out for those, especially if your roof's soft washing. Really watch your surfaces when you're cleaning a home. Use plenty of water, use your preventative measures, and you'll be fine. As long as you do everything by the book, you'll be fine. Now, you've got those other two things done. Now, one thing I failed to mention is, these typical homes typically have a concrete driveway. And if the driveway's got really bad organics, or it's just best practice in general, okay, in between doing the first half of the house and the second half of the house, or whenever, at the earliest opportune time, when you have some hose there or what have you, you really want to get some pre-treat SH chemical onto that driveway as soon as possible. That way it'll have the longest dwell time. We always save the flat work for last because it's the most simple part of the job and it needs the longest dwell time on the chemical. When I'm working alone, I like to do the driveway last. Again, you surface clean it after it's dwelled. You surface clean it, then you can trim it. When you're surface cleaning, you don't want to go too fast, or you'll leave tiger stripes, the little swirly marks where the surface cleaner hasn't cleaned it hard enough. You'll also leave overlap marks where in between passes you'll see where the surface cleaner has overlapped its last cleaning, and it'll clean the concrete twice and it'll be lighter than the rest. Just move at a nice, consistent, steady pace with it and you'll be fine. You trim the driveway out, then you rinse the driveway. Depending on your water, like we said earlier, you can either tight fan it, soft fan it, open ball valve. There's many ways to skin that cat, but me personally, I like to use both of my pressure washing machines on about, let's say 30-40% power each on 200 feet of hose, and use that dual flow, use that massive volume of water to quickly rinse down that driveway, because you don't need any water in your buffer tank when you're leaving that customer's house. And chances are, during the course of the actual house wash, the customer's water is typically going to exceed the usage of your machines, especially if you're waiting on dwell time, or anytime you're off of that trigger, that water's bypassing. You're filling up on water. So I typically just use as much water as I physically can, because I've got a full buffer tank at the end whenever I'm washing the driveway. It helps it, just faster. So you got all that done. The house is rinsed off. It's looking great. Here's what you do. You go and you start to roll up your hoses. You put up all your equipment. And what I like to do, what I've been taught really, you take that water hose and you rinse down everything on your trailer. You give it a nice good rinse. If there's any splatter on your truck, you just rinse it off. We like to keep clean equipment. Rinse that stuff off, and then you can go and turn your water off, grab your water key, throw it in your pocket, throw it in the toolbox of the truck, wherever you keep it. Roll that hose up, make sure all that's nice and nip tuck. If you're confident with your job, you can go ahead and dump that tank. Hit that dump valve if you're really sure of everything. What I like to do, and what we've been taught, is we do our final walk around. Now, the final walk around, you're walking around every zone that you have been to. You're looking for your tools, you're taking mental notes. You know, you've put away all of your equipment on the trailer and truck. You visualize that, you took mental note of it. Now, on this final walk around, you're looking around for anything you may have left behind by chance. If you had to grab a phone call or talk to the customer, there's a small chance that you've left something behind. And the final walk around it saved me a good many times. I've left stuff behind and I've found it on that final walk around. I'm a very large proponent of that. So, final walk around is complete. You can take after pictures for your Google Business or Facebook business page. You know, take some good before and after pictures. That helps with getting new leads. And you know, the customer is happy. Sometimes you can send pictures of completed work to the customer and they will pay you via payment link or some other way. Most commonly, the customer is going to be getting home around that time. They might have been in town grabbing a check or some cash out of a bank or something. You know, what it's best practice really in the industry, that I don't know if many people talk about this, but you want to make sure the customer is happy and completely satisfied with everything. And then typically, you know, they pay you and you move on with life. Like, that's what I like to do. It's just best practice. No matter what you're doing, is you make sure the customer's happy before you ask for payment. Or, you know, you really should, like, it's just going to go how it goes. You know, you talk to them, get your check, and when you're walking back to that truck, you're going to do a few things. You're going to make sure you dump that dump valve, that water out of your tank. If you're just going to put it back up at the shop or your house or wherever you keep it. Another thing is you're gonna pick up your cones. I've accidentally ran over a cone before, and I felt like a fool. So you pick up your cones, put them on your trailer or wherever, and what you're gonna want to do then is check your hitch. Do a walk around of your trailer. Make sure everything's in order, the hose reel is locked, all your equipment's battened down tight. Check that trailer hitch, you know, make sure it's fully seated in the ball hitch, the tongue of the trailer. The wiring connection, the safety chains are crossed, all that good stuff. Check that. Check your surroundings, you know, and drive off into the sunset. You've just completed a house wash. I've got more to talk about, guys, but that's going to do it for tonight. I'd like to get a few other things done with my night. If you've stayed this long, thank you guys so much for enjoying this video. If you really liked it, you can consider subscribing, and I'll be posting more videos like this, more pressure washing content in general. And, you know, feel free to give my video a like. It really does help with the algorithm to put this video out to more people. And if you see something you really want in life, go get it.